artists. On the first day of art, I talked a lot. I talked for at least 45 minutes straight. And I don't expect you to remember everything that I said, but I do want to remind you of something that I mentioned on the very first day you met me. I mentioned that art is not something that you just create in school when you're in a classroom during a 45-minute period. Art is all around us. Art is almost every single thing that's been created by another person. And we've been talking about this idea a lot in art class. Trying to recognize that art isn't necessarily something that's in a museum. Art can be something you're wearing, something you're sitting on, an idea that you have, an exploration with materials. Art can be a musical piece. It can be a dance. Art can be putting something together. Art can be blocks. Art can be so many different things that we do in our everyday life and we don't always realize it. So my silver lining in all of this craziness is my opportunity to help you understand that art isn't something that just happens in school. Art is something that happens every day. And I hope that if nothing else, I can help you think a little bit more about how you can become more creative in your own space using what you have around you. It might be limited, and that's okay. Because when artists are limited and we don't have access to the materials we want, that's when we get most creative. When we have a problem to solve, that's when we're most creative. So today, I would like to talk to you a little bit about trying to prepare a space at home for art making. And I'm not talking about a studio, because it took me over 3 decades to have a studio space just where I can create my art. I'm just talking about ways that you can rethink the spaces that you have available to you to make them into spaces where you can create, you can think creatively, and you can relax, unwind, and work on something. So today I'd like to give you a couple tips that hopefully you can use to rethink the places around you in your home and hopefully get set up to start creating some art in your environment in the way that's best for you as an artist. And I hope this isn't something that you just do for the next couple weeks. I hope this is going to be a new way of thinking for you in any space where you can think about how that space can help you be your most creative, relaxed, best version of yourself. No matter where you are, no matter how old you are, it's always good to have spaces where you can be your creative best self. One of the first spaces in your home that you might have access to that you could consider temporarily transforming to create a work of art might be a desk. And for a lot of us, our desk might be shared with a computer, which is totally fine. One of the first things that I do before I make art on my desk is I clean my space and I try and keep it organized. So instead of just piling things on the floor, I really try to find opportunities to put things where they belong and put them away. That's one of the first things that I do when I'm setting up my space. Just keep everything organized, and it might mean that you have to spend an hour or so organizing your desk and putting things away. And if that's the case, that's okay. Spend some time getting organized. The next thing that I do if I'm using a space like a desk, especially with the shared computer, is I first think about my materials. If you are using a space that has electronics, you're not going to want to use materials such as watercolors or anything that could damage electronics. So a space with a desk that has a computer on it might be better for dry artwork. And if you're going to do some dry artwork and you have a computer in the way, maybe see if you can very gently, without unplugging things, move some of the keyboards or the mouse to the side so you have a little bit more room to work. If you have a sketchbook, awesome, you can use your sketchbook. But for a lot of us, we might just have copy paper. If you don't even have access to copy paper, start getting really creative. Maybe you can dig around and find things like Post-its, note cards. Maybe you can find index cards. You can use any surface you want. You can even reuse other surfaces. Like maybe you could reuse some paper that you have, even wrapping paper. So get creative. There's no right or wrong when you're creating at your desk. Just make sure that you have some space spread out and ready to go. Now, whether you're at a desk or another particular place where you're making art, one thing that I know many of you love is music. You might also want to create some kind of playlist where you can listen to music while making art. If your computer's right here and there's nobody who needs a quiet space around you, you could play it right from your computer. If that's not an option, if you have family members working from home or creating and learning from home, you might need to use earbuds instead or some kind of headset over your ears. But listening to your own music, even though I know you all love my music, might be a really great thing to do while you're making art, especially if you're inside in a noisy environment. Just make sure that the music that you're listening to isn't so awesome that you get distracted. It has to be just right for making art. And it's taken me years to refine my playlists. Sometimes my favorite music is too distracting and I end up singing instead of drawing. If that starts happening, you might need to pick a different song that maybe isn't your favorite song, but at least maybe it would be a really good background song for you. Might take a while till you figure it out, but you'll get there eventually. Think about your music and how you'll play your music, and if it's something you want. Side tip, when I'm really trying to focus, I really like to listen to instrumental music. Soundtracks for movies are really cool. And another thing that I find really cool and helpful is music in languages that I don't understand. It's often enough of a cool beat that I really enjoy listening to it, but I don't find myself singing along if I don't speak the language. So think about what materials you use, if there's any expensive equipment around, maybe they're dry materials, and how you can organize your space. And no matter where you are, always make sure you organize before and clean up when you're done. I don't want emails from grown-ups in your life complaining that you did not clean up your art materials. So put things back the way they found them and make sure you have a nice, clean, organized space. For most of us, we don't have our own private desk where we can work on, but that's okay. You can, with the permission of a grown-up, maybe use a countertop space in your kitchen. Maybe you have a dining room table that you can work on. Just make sure you get permission and talk to your grown-ups about things like tablecloths or putting something down. They might not want you to get art supplies on some of these surfaces. And before you begin working on a surface such as a countertop or a table, you might just want to help your grown-up clean up a little bit. They really appreciate that. And then when I'm done cleaning, I always just like to take a second to wipe off the surface so my surface is clean for my artwork. Make sure it's really dry when you do that. And again, these places and spaces in our home might be good for different kinds of art materials. If you do have access to paint, that's awesome. Even if you have paint and a desk at home, paint might be something better used at a surface such as a hard countertop or table. But again, make sure you check with the grown-up. Once you are all set up in your space and ready to go, it it might be a little distracting. Somebody might be making dinner. It might be kind of loud. So again, consider maybe having a playlist, especially in some of these shared spaces, where you can turn on your music and you can just kind of relax, unwind, and do your thing. One of my favorite spaces for making art is also right here outside on a nice day. If you have a sketchbook, it might work best because you can find a comfy spot, you can cuddle up, you can open up, and you can get right to work. If you don't have a sketchbook, it's kind of awkward to put a piece of paper on your lap. So get creative. Maybe you have a cutting board at home. If it's a windy day, you might have to figure out how to attach it. I put a little round piece of tape on the back. Then you can lean, cuddle up, and create. Maybe you have a baking sheet. You could put your paper on the baking sheet. And again, if it's a windy day, you might have to get creative. Maybe you look in the junk drawer and find some clips and things. Maybe you have tape. Maybe you have a lot of little works of art that you can create. See what you can come up with to transform the spaces that are all around you into art-making spaces and relaxing spaces. And again, if it's kind of noisy or distracting, see if you can grab some earbuds, put on your playlist, and make some art. I hope this video helped you think about ways that you can transform the spaces in your home into spaces that you could potentially use to create art. And I hope that in the future, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are, you can always start to think about creating spaces in your environment around you where you can be your best, most creative self. There's 2 rules when you're making art at home. Number 1, communicate with your family. Let them know what you're doing. Make sure you get permission and just share with them, because they might have some requests when you're working in the space, such as take the tablecloth off the table, work with paint outside, don't use Sharpie on thin paper because it might go through the paper and onto the desk surface. So communicate is the first rule. The second rule is to clean up. When you're adapting spaces in your environment for art making, it's really important not to leave your tools out, not to leave your artwork out. Make sure you're cleaning up so you can create an environment that's conducive to learning and living for everybody in your family. And it's also very protective of your art materials that you have at home. And it's also very protective of your artwork, especially if you have pets or younger siblings. The last thing that I want to remind you is to be open-minded. I don't expect you to have access to unlimited art supplies at home. I don't even have that in my studio. So please know that I don't have expectations for you to have lots of art materials. What I do want is for you to be creative with what's around you and not be stressed or anxious that what you have is not enough. The things that you can find in your home are perfect for me, and they should be perfect for your art creating. Please post comments if you have any questions or concerns, or reach out to me via email. I'm always here to help. I'll end this video with a song and a quote. The song comes from my elementary art teacher, Queen Paintbrush, who still inspires me to this day. And at the conclusion of every art class, we would sing a song. And I'm going to change the last ending line for you. Purple cows are welcome here, and so are funny faces, lines and shapes and strawberry grapes. Make your own art space. Look around you, find your own art spaces, and make it your creative space. And I want to end with a quote as my sign off from Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein says that creativity is intelligence having fun. See you soon, artists.